I'm Ryan Mitchell, I'm 38 years old, and I live in Arcadia Heights in Scottsdale, Arizona. On paper, I have the kind of life that looks curated for a magazine spread. I'm a corporate strategy consultant, the kind of job title that makes people nod politely even if they don't fully understand what I do. Our house sits on a quiet, palm-lined street where every driveway holds something German and expensive, and every backyard looks like it belongs in a luxury real estate listing. That Saturday I decided to host what I thought would be the perfect summer cookout. I had spent the entire week planning it down to the smallest detail. I ordered premium dry-aged steaks from a specialty butcher in Phoenix, stocked the outdoor fridge with imported Italian wine and craft beer, and strung warm white lights across the patio so that once the sun dipped behind Camelback Mountain, everything would glow softly and intentionally. I hired a landscaping crew to do a quick touch-up on the yard, trimmed the hedges myself that morning, and even set up a playlist that felt effortlessly sophisticated. It was important to me that everything looked successful, because I believed that reflected on us. Lauren, my wife, floated through the house in a white summer dress that probably cost more than my first car payment. She's 34, effortlessly social, the kind of woman who can turn a casual brunch into a competitive sport. Her friends arrived in a cluster: Brittany Harper with her oversized sunglasses and permanent smirk, Jade Collins who never lowers her voice, and Monica Reyes who watches everything with sharp, calculating eyes. They air-kissed, complimented each other's outfits, and immediately claimed the seating area near the pool like it was reserved. I stayed at the grill, manning the fire like I was guarding something more than steaks. The heat from the Arizona sun mixed with the charcoal smoke, and I focused on getting perfect grill marks, flipping each cut with precision. From where I stood, I could hear fragments of their conversation drifting across the yard, carried by laughter that felt just a little too sharp. At first it was harmless gossip about someone's failed startup, a new Pilates instructor, a vacation in Cabo. Then I heard my name. Brittany's voice came through clearly, amused and loud enough that she clearly didn't care who heard. She said, "Lauren, don't you ever wish you married someone more ambitious?" There was a pause, followed by a soft ripple of laughter. Jade chimed in without missing a beat, saying he's stable, sure, but exciting. The word exciting stretched in the air like an accusation. Then they laughed harder, the kind of laugh that builds off each other. I waited for Lauren to say something. To correct them. To remind them that I worked 70-hour weeks, that I built strategies for companies that moved millions of dollars, that I paid for the house they were currently admiring. I expected at least a light protest, a playful defense. Instead, she laughed too. It wasn't a nervous laugh. It wasn't the polite kind you use to deflect. It was genuine. Amused. Comfortable. As if she had heard this before and agreed. I stood there gripping the metal tongs so tightly that my knuckles went white. The steaks hissed as fat dripped into the flames, flaring up in sudden bursts of fire, and I realized that the heat I felt wasn't just from the grill anymore. In that moment, something shifted inside me. All the effort I had poured into that day, into our life, into building something that looked impressive from the outside, suddenly felt hollow. From their perspective, I wasn't the accomplished consultant with a polished resume and a meticulously maintained home. I wasn't the man who made sure the mortgage was paid early, who upgraded the kitchen last year because Lauren mentioned liking marble countertops, who planned trips, handled taxes, and absorbed stress so she wouldn't have to. In their circle, I was the safe option. The stable one. The boring punchline. The backyard that I had designed as a stage to showcase our success became exactly that, a stage. And I was standing in the background, flipping steaks while my wife and her friends performed a version of my life where I was the least impressive part of it. I realized that the laughter drifting across my own patio wasn't harmless. It was a spotlight, and I wasn't the lead character in my own home. I don't remember making the decision to walk over to the table, I just remember setting the tongs down with deliberate care, wiping my hands on a towel, and feeling an unfamiliar calm settle over me. It wasn't rage. Rage would have been easier. It was clarity. The kind that strips away hesitation. I stepped away from the grill and crossed the patio slowly, the sound of their laughter still hanging in the warm evening air under the string lights I had carefully installed hours earlier. They didn't notice me at first. Brittany was mid-sentence, gesturing dramatically with her wine glass, Jade leaning forward like she was waiting for the next punchline, Monica smiling faintly. Lauren looked relaxed, almost entertained. I stopped at the edge of the table and said Brittany's name in a level voice. All four of them looked up at once, startled by how close I was. I told her that ambition is an interesting thing to measure, especially coming from someone whose second engagement ended after maxing out 3 credit cards to fund a wedding that never happened. Her smile dropped instantly. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I turned to Jade and reminded her that stability might not be thrilling, but it's useful when you're the one left covering unpaid legal fees after your ex decided to disappear. The air shifted. Monica suddenly found her drink very interesting. Then I looked at Lauren, not angrily, just directly, and I listed things in the same calm tone. The Santorini trip last summer, the one with the cliffside suite and private sunset dinner. The designer SUV sitting in our garage that she barely drives because she prefers rideshares to events. The penthouse upgrades we added last year, the marble counters, the custom closet installation, the extended patio deck they were currently sitting on. I said plainly that I paid for all of it. Not my parents. Not some inheritance. Me. Long hours, relentless travel, negotiations that drained me. I paid for it. The table went silent in a way that felt heavier than any laughter. No one had a clever response. Brittany stared at her lap. Jade's jaw tightened. Lauren's face flushed, not with guilt but with humiliation. The string lights flickered slightly in the background, and I became acutely aware of how quiet the entire backyard had become, like even the music had retreated. I didn't insult anyone. I didn't curse. I simply stated facts, then picked up the platter of finished steaks and walked back to the grill. Conversation resumed eventually, but it was forced and brittle. The party ended earlier than planned. Guests left with stiff hugs and awkward smiles. Later, when we were finally alone, Lauren didn't wait long. She accused me of embarrassing her friends, of making things uncomfortable, of being unnecessarily harsh. Her voice trembled with indignation. I looked at her and told her she embarrassed me first. I reminded her that I heard every word. That I stood there while she laughed at the idea that I wasn't ambitious enough. That in our own backyard, I became a joke. The drive home from dropping off some catering equipment was silent at first. Scottsdale at night is deceptively peaceful, palm trees casting long shadows under streetlights. I kept my eyes on the road. Then she said it. Quietly, almost thoughtfully, as if she had been turning it over in her mind for a while. Sometimes I wonder if I settled. There was no anger in her voice. That made it worse. It sounded honest. Reflective. Like she was admitting a private doubt that had existed long before that evening. The words didn't hit like a shout. They fractured something slowly and precisely, like a crack spreading through glass. I felt my grip tighten on the steering wheel. Not because I wanted to argue, but because I suddenly understood that this wasn't about her friends or a careless joke. This was about how she saw me when I wasn't in the room. About how she measured my worth against some undefined version of excitement. I realized that all the success I thought we shared had been reduced to background noise in her narrative. Stability had become synonymous with settling. And in that quiet car, under the glow of passing streetlights, I understood that the laughter in the backyard wasn't a one-time slip. It was a reflection of something much deeper, something that had been quietly eroding beneath the surface long before I ever picked up those tongs. The next morning the house felt unnaturally pristine, sunlight pouring through the oversized windows and reflecting off the marble countertops we had chosen together, the kind of kitchen that gets compliments before anyone even tastes the food. Lauren stood at the island scrolling through her phone, wrapped in a silk robe, looking as composed as if the night before had been nothing more than a minor inconvenience. I watched her for a moment, realizing how easily she could compartmentalize discomfort when it suited her. I didn't raise my voice when I spoke. I told her we needed to talk and she sighed, already defensive, already preparing to frame me as the aggressor. I told her calmly that I refused to be the silent provider in my own marriage. I said I will not bankroll a lifestyle that allows me to be ridiculed in my own backyard while my wife laughs along. I explained that stability is not a flaw, ambition is not measured by theatrics, and I am not a supporting character in a life I built. My tone was steady, almost clinical, because emotion would have made it easier for her to dismiss me. I gave her a choice, plainly and without drama. Respect our marriage, which includes respecting me when I'm not in the room, or continue chasing validation from women who belittle me to elevate themselves. I told her she cannot have both. She cannot enjoy the comfort my work provides while entertaining narratives that diminish it. I wasn't threatening. I was setting a boundary that should have been obvious years ago. She stared at me like I had spoken a foreign language. Her jaw tightened and instead of answering, she accused me of being controlling, of trying to isolate her from her friends, of turning one joke into a referendum on our entire relationship. I repeated that it wasn't about one joke. It was about what that joke revealed. She grabbed her purse, said she needed air, and walked out before giving me any real response. The front door closed with a firmness that felt intentional. What followed was a week of cold, calculated silence. We moved around each other like polite strangers sharing a luxury rental. She continued her brunches, dressing carefully, leaving mid-morning with a casual goodbye that felt transactional. I would hear her laughing on the phone from the other room, the same bright, effortless laughter that had echoed across the patio. She continued living comfortably, using the SUV, scheduling spa appointments, ordering deliveries, as if nothing fundamental had shifted. If she felt tension, she hid it well. During that week I stopped trying to initiate conversation. I went to work, came home, handled emails, reviewed contracts, and observed. I realized how easy it had become for her to assume permanence, as if my presence and provision were constants that required no maintenance or respect. That realization did something irreversible inside me. Midweek, during a break between meetings, I booked a solo escape to St. Lucia. I chose a private resort with cliffside views and oceanfront suites, the kind of place couples usually post about with curated captions. I didn't hesitate over the price. When the confirmation email arrived, I left it open on my laptop screen at the kitchen counter that evening, not theatrically, just visibly. I didn't mention it. I didn't need to. She saw it. The shift was almost immediate. That same night she suggested we cook dinner together. The next evening there were candles on the table, music playing softly, her voice gentler than it had been in weeks. She apologized for how things escalated, for letting her friends go too far, for not realizing how much it affected me. She reached for my hand more often, lingered in conversation, suggested we take a trip together instead. She said let's fix this like it was a shared project that had simply fallen behind schedule. I listened. I watched the effort. I recognized the strategy beneath it. The warmth felt reactive, not reflective. It arrived only after she sensed movement, only after the illusion of certainty cracked. The problem was that something in me had already gone quiet. Not angry. Not vengeful. Just resolved. By the time she decided we needed candlelight and soft apologies, I had already internalized what it meant for her to wonder if she had settled. That sentence did not disappear because the lighting improved. Respect offered under the threat of absence does not feel the same as respect given freely. And as she spoke about fixing us, I realized that the moment for repair had passed long before she decided to try. A few days after the candlelit apologies began, I told Lauren I had to attend a business summit in Denver. I kept my tone neutral, offered just enough detail to make it believable, mentioned networking dinners and panel discussions. She nodded with mild interest, asked how long I would be gone, and reminded me to text when I landed. There was no suspicion in her voice, no anxiety about distance. If anything, she seemed comfortable again, reassured by what she believed was stability restored. I didn't fly to Denver. Instead, I checked into a modest downtown hotel 15 minutes from our house, a place designed for anonymity rather than luxury. The lobby smelled faintly of industrial cleaner, the carpets were patterned to hide stains, and the room itself was small and impersonal, beige walls and a standard desk facing a window that overlooked a parking garage. It was nothing like the resorts or penthouses we were accustomed to. I chose it deliberately. I needed quiet. I needed distance without spectacle. That night, around 9, I called her. I kept my voice relaxed, asked how her evening was going, told her that summit events were tedious but productive. She answered sweetly, almost warmly, asking if I'd eaten, telling me she missed me. Her tone was soft in a way that would have reassured anyone who hadn't heard her laugh in the backyard. We spoke for a few minutes about nothing in particular. Then we said goodnight. I didn't hang up immediately. I set my phone on the bedside table, assuming the call had ended. There was a faint rustling sound, like movement against fabric, then the unmistakable continuation of voices. The line hadn't disconnected. At first I thought it was static, but then I heard her clearly. Not the softened version she used with me, but the sharper, unfiltered voice I had heard once before from across the patio. She exhaled dramatically and said something about how exhausting it was to keep reassuring me. There was laughter in the background. Brittany's voice cut in, bright and cruelly amused, telling her to just tell him you want a divorce, he'll panic and beg. More laughter. Lauren replied without hesitation, saying he would do anything to keep this lifestyle. The way she said lifestyle made it sound transactional, like I was an access point rather than a partner. She spoke about me as if I were predictable, manageable, almost pathetic. I lay on the stiff hotel bed staring at the ceiling, every muscle in my body rigid, listening to my marriage dissected like entertainment. Then the conversation shifted in a way I wasn't prepared for. Brittany asked about someone by name I didn't recognize. Lauren's tone changed again, this time lower, conspiratorial. She began describing another man. Not vaguely. Not ambiguously. Specifically. She talked about where they met, how careful they had been, how thrilling it felt. There were details I won't repeat in my own mind, details delivered between bursts of laughter while her friends reacted with shock and applause. She framed it as empowerment, as proof that she hadn't settled after all. Each word landed with a precision that felt surgical. The hotel room was completely still, the air conditioner humming softly, traffic faint in the distance. I didn't move. I didn't interrupt. I didn't breathe deeply enough to make a sound. I listened to my wife brag about betrayal as if it were a badge of independence, as if I were nothing more than the financier of her freedom. There was no dramatic spike of anger. No urge to shout or call back. Instead, something inside me recalibrated. The warmth that had once fueled long workdays and generous decisions receded. The part of me that felt responsible for protecting us dissolved quietly. In its place was clarity so sharp it felt almost peaceful. When the call finally disconnected, the silence in the room was absolute. I stared at the ceiling for a long time, replaying her words not because I doubted what I heard, but because repetition made them solid, undeniable. The laughter echoed in my mind, layered over candlelight dinners and soft apologies, over Santorini sunsets and marble countertops. Lying there in that ordinary hotel bed, I understood that the fracture I felt days earlier had not just widened. It had completed. Something essential had shifted beyond repair, and whatever part of me once tried to justify, negotiate, or absorb disrespect had gone permanently cold. By the time the first light of sunrise filtered through the thin hotel curtains, I had not slept at all. I had spent the night staring into the dark, replaying every word I heard, not to torture myself but to strip it of emotion. I forced myself to analyze it the way I would analyze a failing company, removing sentiment and focusing only on facts, patterns, risk exposure. When my phone screen finally showed 5:47 a.m., I sat up, opened my contacts, and texted a high-powered divorce attorney in Phoenix whose name I had been given years ago at a corporate event. I kept the message brief and professional, requesting a confidential consultation regarding marital dissolution and asset protection. I did not add context. I did not vent. I simply initiated the process. Within an hour I also reached out to Derek Lawson, a former Marine I had known since my late 20s. Derek was the kind of man who spoke little but observed everything, disciplined, methodical, unshaken by discomfort. I asked him for a favor and told him I needed discretion above all else. He did not ask for details over the phone. He just said tell me where and when. When I returned home later that afternoon, Lauren greeted me with a casual hug, asking how Denver was. I answered smoothly, matching her tone, offering neutral details about panels and networking receptions. If she sensed anything different in me, she did not show it. I watched her carefully, noting how easily she transitioned between roles, how comfortable she seemed within the structure she believed was intact. 2 days later, while she was out at brunch, Derek arrived. He walked through the house with a technician's focus, assessing angles and blind spots. The cameras he installed were discreet and legally placed for property monitoring, positioned in common areas only, the living room, the kitchen, my office, locations where privacy expectations were limited and documentation was permissible. There was nothing dramatic about it. No hidden wires dangling from ceilings, no reckless improvisation. Everything was installed cleanly, professionally, almost invisibly. When he finished, he handed me access credentials and reminded me to remain patient. Patience was something I understood. Over the following days I combed through our financial records with the same precision I used in corporate audits. I downloaded bank statements, traced transfers, reviewed credit card expenditures line by line. I documented travel dates, cross-referenced them with charges I did not recognize, flagged unusual withdrawals. I printed emails, archived text message logs that were legally accessible, cataloged assets, property deeds, insurance policies. I built a timeline, not from suspicion but from evidence. Each document was saved, backed up, organized into labeled folders. There were moments when fragments of anger surfaced, when an unfamiliar restaurant charge aligned too neatly with a night she claimed to be elsewhere, but I did not allow those reactions to dictate my actions. Emotion clouds strategy. Strategy requires clarity. I reminded myself repeatedly that outrage would only compromise leverage. At home I maintained routine. I went to work, returned at predictable hours, asked neutral questions about her day. I did not accuse. I did not probe. I observed. The cameras quietly recorded entrances and exits, interactions, patterns. The house remained immaculate, the marble counters gleaming, the SUV polished in the driveway. On the surface, nothing had changed. Inside me, everything had. There were no screaming matches, no dramatic confrontations, no slammed doors. I did not demand confessions. I did not reveal what I knew. Instead, I prepared. Every document, every timestamp, every inconsistency became part of a structure that would not rely on memory or emotion. I understood that in situations like this, composure is power. The person who reacts impulsively forfeits advantage. By the end of the week, I had a clear picture forming, not just of betrayal but of exposure, financial and reputational. I reviewed the files one final time late one evening in my office, the glow of the monitor reflecting off the glass shelves behind me. I felt no satisfaction, no triumph. Only steadiness. This was no longer about wounded pride or humiliation in a backyard. It was about control over the narrative of my own life. And control is not seized through anger. It is secured through preparation, silence, and timing. 2 weeks later, our backyard was transformed again, this time not for a casual cookout but for Lauren's 35th birthday party, an event she had been planning with obsessive attention to aesthetic detail. Gold decor framed the patio, metallic balloons anchored to weighted bases, long tables dressed in cream linens and polished cutlery reflecting the string lights overhead. A champagne tower stood near the center like a monument to indulgence, glasses stacked with mathematical precision, waiting for the ceremonial pour. Her entire social circle was present, dressed in summer formal, laughing loudly, phones out, documenting everything. I moved through the crowd calmly, greeting guests, shaking hands, maintaining the same composed demeanor I carried into boardrooms. No one would have guessed that beneath the tailored jacket and polite smile, every detail of the evening had already been accounted for. The outdoor projector was positioned discreetly against the far wall, something Lauren had approved earlier in the week to display a montage of photos from past birthdays and vacations. She believed it was her idea. Halfway through the party, after multiple toasts and enough champagne to blur restraint, Lauren was glowing with attention. Compliments clung to her, laughter followed her movements, and she thrived under it. Brittany hovered close, already flushed from alcohol, Jade animated and loud, Monica scanning the crowd as usual. Music pulsed softly in the background, conversations overlapping in warm, careless waves. Then Lauren reached for the microphone. The chatter quieted in anticipation of something sentimental or theatrical. She swayed slightly, smiling wide, basking in the spotlight. She began by thanking everyone for coming, for loving her, for supporting her, her voice honeyed and dramatic. Then her tone shifted, and she said she thought it was time to stop pretending. She announced, clearly and with performative boldness, that she wanted a divorce. Her friends erupted in laughter immediately, assuming this was either a joke or a power move designed to provoke a reaction. A few people clapped uncertainly. Brittany leaned forward expectantly, eyes darting toward me as if waiting to watch me unravel, to plead, to salvage the spectacle. I did neither. I nodded once toward the projector technician I had quietly briefed earlier. The music cut. The screen flickered to life behind Lauren, illuminating the gold decor with a sterile glow. At first there was confusion, a ripple of murmurs as people turned. Then her voice filled the yard. Clear. Unmistakable. Not the curated birthday version, but the one I heard through a phone line that was never meant to stay open. The recording played without distortion. She spoke about lies with casual amusement. She laughed about manipulation. Her words carried across the silent crowd, last night was worth every lie. The sound of her friends' laughter followed, sharp and unfiltered, echoing through the speakers and into the stunned quiet of the party. It was different hearing it in daylight, amplified, stripped of context. Conversations died mid-breath. Champagne glasses froze mid-air, tilted but unmoving. Somewhere near the back, someone gasped audibly. Brittany's expression changed first. The color drained from her face as recognition set in, as she realized the implications were no longer confined to a private circle. Jade stepped backward instinctively, as if distance could separate her from what was unfolding. Monica's composure fractured, eyes wide, calculating rapidly but finding no exit. Lauren stood motionless at the center of it all, microphone still in her hand, the glow from the projector casting harsh light across her features. As more of the recording played, as details surfaced that left nothing to interpretation, I watched her face lose color in real time. The confidence that had fueled her announcement dissolved, replaced by something raw and unguarded. The backyard that once framed her laughter now amplified her own words back at her. No commentary from me was necessary. No raised voice. No accusations. The evidence spoke in her tone, in her phrasing, in the casual cruelty she had never expected to hear outside a private call. Around us, the celebration collapsed into silence, gold decorations shimmering pointlessly under string lights that suddenly felt too bright. And I remained exactly where I was, steady, composed, no longer the punchline in my own home. The party dissolved faster than it had formed. Conversations fractured into whispers, heels clicked hurriedly across stone, and guests who had arrived eager for spectacle suddenly found urgent reasons to leave. No one wanted to linger in the aftermath of exposed truth. The champagne tower remained half full, untouched, condensation sliding down glass stems that no longer felt celebratory. Gold balloons drifted slightly in the warm night air, decorations now absurd against the silence settling over the yard. Lauren stood near the center of it all, mascara streaking down her cheeks, the microphone long since lowered. The bravado that had carried her announcement was gone, replaced by raw panic. When the last clusters of guests filtered out through the side gate and the music had been shut off completely, she turned to me with shaking hands and said that I humiliated her. Her voice cracked between anger and disbelief, as if she genuinely could not reconcile how control had slipped from her. I looked at her steadily. There was no satisfaction in me, no visible anger, just an absence of turmoil. I reached up slowly and removed my wedding ring, the metal cool against my fingers despite the lingering heat of the evening. I placed it on the patio table between us with deliberate care. I told her she humiliated herself. I did not raise my voice. I did not elaborate. The recording had already done that. She cried harder at that, accusing me of cruelty, of orchestration, of turning her birthday into a courtroom. I listened without interruption, watching how quickly accountability translated into victimhood when the audience disappeared. The backyard lights flickered softly above us, illuminating a scene that hours earlier had been curated for admiration and was now reduced to consequence. That night we slept in separate rooms without discussion. There was nothing left to debate. The house felt cavernous despite its familiarity, every polished surface reflecting a different version of what had just ended. The next morning the sunlight poured again into the marble kitchen, indifferent and bright. I dressed early, placed a thick envelope on the counter where she would see it immediately, and waited. When she entered, her eyes were swollen, movement slower, as if gravity had increased overnight. She noticed the envelope almost instantly. Her hands trembled as she opened it and scanned the contents. Divorce papers. Filed weeks earlier, dated and processed before her birthday invitation had even been finalized. Every document prepared with the same precision I bring to contracts and negotiations. Financial disclosures attached. Terms outlined clearly. No theatrics. No gaps. She looked up at me with something close to fear and asked if I had planned this. The question hung between us, fragile and accusatory. I told her evenly that no, I had not planned this in the way she meant. I said she did. I just finished it. I watched the words land, watched the realization settle that this outcome had been built slowly through choices she considered harmless, through laughter she assumed was private, through betrayals she framed as empowerment. She sank into one of the kitchen chairs, papers trembling in her hands. For a moment I saw the version of her from years ago, before competition and validation shaped her priorities, before I became an accessory to a lifestyle rather than a partner in a marriage. But nostalgia did not override clarity. She signed. The sound of pen on paper was soft, almost anticlimactic. No dramatic speeches followed. No apologies that could alter trajectory. Just ink drying on documents that formalized what had already been true. When she finished, she slid the papers back across the counter. I gathered them carefully, aligning the edges. There was no triumph in the gesture. Only completion. As I stood there in that kitchen, the same marble surfaces gleaming, the same sunlight stretching across the floor, I noticed something unfamiliar inside me. Not anger. Not vindication. Quiet. A steady, grounded peace that had been absent for months. The constant low hum of tension, of waiting for the next subtle dismissal or concealed lie, was gone. For the first time in a long time, the house felt silent in a way that did not threaten me. And in that silence, I understood that what ended was not just a marriage, but the role I had been cast in without my consent. A few days after the papers were signed, Derek called me with information he had been quietly verifying. The name was Michael Grant, 42 years old, married, 2 teenage sons, an accountant living in Gilbert. Derek did not dramatize it when he told me. He simply presented the facts, cross-referenced addresses, employment records, vehicle registration. It was the same tone we had maintained from the beginning. Evidence first. Emotion nowhere. I sat with the name for a long moment after the call ended. Not because it surprised me, but because it completed the outline. A real person. A real house. A family that existed outside whispered phone calls and careless laughter. I did not feel rage toward him. What I felt was alignment. If truth had dismantled my illusion, then it did not belong to me alone. Derek offered to handle it himself, but I told him I would go. He drove. The late afternoon sun stretched long across the highway as we headed toward Gilbert, the city quieter than Scottsdale, residential streets lined with trimmed lawns and basketball hoops over garage doors. It was an ordinary neighborhood, the kind built on predictability and routine. We parked a short distance from the house. 2 bikes lay on the driveway near the garage. A sedan I recognized from financial records sat in front. The house was well kept but unremarkable, beige exterior, blue shutters, a porch light that hadn't yet turned on. Nothing about it suggested collapse. That was the nature of these things. They exist cleanly on the surface until they don't. I stepped out of the car with the USB in my pocket, feeling its small weight like a final document to be delivered. Derek remained by the curb, watchful but distant. I walked up the driveway and rang the doorbell. A woman answered after a few seconds, early 40s, composed, cautious but polite. There was no audience, no spectacle, no raised voices. I introduced myself simply and asked if we could speak privately for a moment. We stood just inside the doorway, the faint sound of a television somewhere deeper in the house. I told her calmly that I believed she deserved information that directly affected her life. I did not insult her husband. I did not editorialize. I handed her the USB and explained that it contained recordings and documentation. I said she could review it when she was ready, in whatever way she chose, and that I would not contact her again. Her expression shifted gradually from confusion to comprehension. There is a specific silence that follows realization, a recalibration of reality. I recognized it because I had lived inside it weeks earlier in a hotel room. She did not cry. She did not shout. She simply nodded slowly, absorbing the weight of what I had handed her. I walked back down the driveway without looking behind me. Derek started the engine as soon as I closed the door. Neither of us spoke for several minutes as we drove away, the neighborhood shrinking in the rearview mirror. It did not feel like revenge. Revenge requires heat, a desire to see someone suffer. What I felt was clean. Balanced. Truth returned to where it belonged. No theatrics. No projector screens. Just information placed in the hands of someone who had unknowingly been standing in the same illusion I once occupied. As the road opened ahead of us and the sun dipped lower, I noticed how light my chest felt. Not triumphant. Not vindicated. Simply unburdened. The performance had ended, the lights cooled, the script exhausted. Lauren had always loved an audience, loved tension and applause and the thrill of dramatic reveals. She wanted a performance, something bold and attention-grabbing, something that positioned her at the center. She just never realized that from the beginning, I controlled the stage lighting.